As dawn breaks over the rugged wilderness, the wind sweeps over a vast, silent plain dotted with jagged rocks. A solitary shepherd, cloaked and weathered, guides his flock through the pale morning light. Suddenly, the man catches a flicker, an unexpected blaze on the slope of the nearby mountain. The shepherd pauses, brow furrowed, drawn by a burning bush that blazes with a supernatural intensity, yet is not consumed. He approaches cautiously, awe and trepidation mingling in his eyes. The flames dance without smoke, their golden tongues casting eerie shadows across the sand. As he draws near, the air hums with unseen energy. A commanding, ethereal voice echoes from the midst of the fire. "Moses! Moses!" Startled, the shepherd answers, "Here I am." Welcome back to the Bible Paladin as we continue our study of Exodus. Now, many of us have heard or read the name of God, while many people will not even utter it out of respect and honor, including many Jews to this day. For myself, I too hesitate to say the name Yahweh for the same reasons.
Why'd you say that name?
But also because we're not even sure about the correct pronunciation. While we have the tetragrammaton in Hebrew, we don't exactly know where to place the vowels or even which vowels to use, considering this was a unique, proper name. And even when vowel points were later added, they did not add those for the name, but rather those for Adonai, or Lord. But I'm getting ahead of myself. In chapter 3, we'll hear how God gives his name to Moses, while he also gives him his mission or quest. And while this definitely is a pivotal point in the life of Moses and the Hebrew people, it is also a shift in the way that God reveals himself and really engages with his people. And so let's begin by reading the very end of chapter 2, which sets up this narrative. During those many days, the king of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God, and God heard their groaning. And God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. We're introduced to a new king of Egypt who seems to be continuing his father's tradition of the mistreatment of the people of Israel. We are told straight out of their bondage under Egypt, and yet these people are crying out for deliverance. These verses are very significant because they give us information that will be repeated throughout the Old Testament, particularly in the Psalms and whenever these events are retold. The people cry out, and God hears them. God takes notice of them. This is not to say that God was not aware of them before, just like we could not say that he would ever forget his covenant, but rather this is the time that God decides to enter once again into the affairs of man.
Name is something we do in our time. It's just come in God's time.
The time, or kairos, has arrived in which God will make his presence known, just as their presence and their plight is known to God. To say that God remembers his covenant is to say that God is faithful to his covenant. In the first chapter, we saw that the covenant that God made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was already coming to fulfillment. They were becoming a large nation, with such a numerous population that even Pharaoh was beginning to fear them. However, the promise had two parts, people and land. They were still a people without a land. In order for God to fulfill the whole covenant, he would have to redeem them from their current situation and to bring them to the place that he had promised. And this would occur during their bitter time of slavery. But God typically doesn't just come down and do it himself. He calls and anoints someone to carry out his mission. He partners with humanity, with his creation. And this, of course, is where Moses comes in. Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, "I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned." When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, "Moses, Moses." And he said, "Here I am." Then he said, "Do not come near. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground." And he said, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now, behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? He said, But I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you, that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. As we begin reading this, you might have noticed that Moses' father-in-law's name has changed from Ruel to Jethro. And there may be a few different reasons for this. One may be that there were two versions of this story that were combined together, and both traditions of the name of Moses' father-in-law have remained. Another idea is that some traditions say that Moses would have been 80 when this occurred, so 40 additional years would have passed, and so Ruel may have passed away, and Jethro might have been his son. The term father-in-law really could mean any relative that was related, so to speak, to Moses through marriage. If you are interested in details like these and furthering your study by looking through the scriptures with different versions and different commentaries, you might be interested in Logos Bible software. It's a comprehensive digital platform that allows you to read and cross-reference numerous books and Bible study notes. Order from the link below, and you'll also be helping out this channel. So as chapter 3 begins, we see that Moses has settled in Midian and has taken on the family occupation of tending sheep.
I am a sheep herder. My father was a sheep herder. My grandfather was a sheep herder.
So, like his ancestors, he must move with the flock, which takes him near Mount Horeb, or the mountain of God. You may be more familiar with the designation Mount Sinai, which it is called more often, especially throughout Deuteronomy. One can imagine he is near the base of the mountain when he sees the bush that is on fire, but not burning. There is a 1700-year-old Greek Orthodox monastery, St. Catherine's, that is located at the base of one of the traditional sites of Mount Sinai, or Jabal Musa, which claims to house this very bush, or at least a descendant of it in their courtyard. And while I am skeptical of this claim, there is a good case for this being the mountain of God. But what makes this place holy in this moment? It's not the location or this particular mountain, but rather because this is where God is present at the moment. And God makes Moses aware of this. First, we are told that it was an angel of the Lord, literally the angel of Yahweh. Many scholars understand this as God himself, appearing in such a way to make himself known in the supernatural fire. Some Christian commentators and apologists will go as far as to say that this angel of the Lord represents the second person of the Blessed Trinity, although the text really doesn't support that, and during the time of its writing, this really wasn't an understanding of God. But also, we do see that very often in the Old Testament, an angel of the Lord and God himself are indistinguishable from each other. In fact, right afterwards, God announces himself, or the angel announces himself as the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob. This is, of course, to let Moses know that he is the God of his ancestors and not some Egyptian deity. And the Lord tells Moses to take off his sandals, which may not seem unusual to us if you've heard the story before, or if you're familiar with such a custom. In fact, taking off one's shoes at a holy place is quite a common tradition throughout the world. But why? Houtman presents some interesting theories in his historical commentaries on the Old Testament. Though it is likely that priests and ordinary folk enter the sanctuary barefooted, what we have here is a very ancient custom, familiar from many peoples and cultures, and still in vogue among the Samaritans on Mount Gerizim, among the Muslims upon entering the mosque, and the Buddhists when they enter the pagoda. The origin and significance of this custom is uncertain. It is conjectured that the absence of footwear made a more direct contact with the holy possible, or that the practice is a remnant of the custom to appear completely naked before the deity. By removing one's clothing, one removes one's uncleanness, making a more immediate contact with the deity possible. Other suggestions have been made as well. Made from the skin of dead animals, leather sandals were regarded as unclean, and therefore should not be allowed to come in contact with the holy. On the sandals is the dust and dirt from outside the holy place. Taking them off is a precaution against defilement.
Yeah, wipe your feet when you enter a person's home.
Yes, careless of me. Tracking mud all over your, mud.
God only tells Moses that the place is holy, and therefore he must take off his sandals. And given the context of this particular story, and with the preoccupation of purity that we see later in the Torah, it would make sense that nothing unclean, such as his sandals, should come in contact with this holy place. But I also like the idea of coming to God, approaching God naked. Not literally, but in the sense that there should be nothing between us and the divine, so that we may approach God really with complete vulnerability and openness. Then Moses said to God, "If I come to the people of Israel and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' what shall I say to them?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am." And he said, "Say this to the people of Israel, 'I am has sent me to you.'" God also said to Moses, "Say this to the people of Israel, 'The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. Go and gather the elders of Israel together, and say to them, 'The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I have observed you, and what has been done to you in Egypt. And I promise that I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. And they will listen to your voice. And you and the elders of Israel shall go to the king of Egypt and say to him, 'The Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. And now, please let us go a 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God.' But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless compelled by a mighty hand. So I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all the wonders that I will do in it. And after that, he will let you go. And I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. And when you go, you shall not go empty. But each woman shall ask of her neighbor, and any woman who lives in her house, for silver and gold jewelry, and for clothing. You shall put them on your sons and your daughters, so you shall plunder the Egyptians." First, Moses asks God his name. Now, God has already told Moses that he is the God of his ancestors, and he uses the designation, "I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." And he will say this 2 more times during this exchange. But what is the name of God? After all, El or Elohim just meant God or gods. And Moses was aware of many names of gods, like Ra, Osiris, Bast, Horus, and the like. Exodus 6:3 states that while God appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he did not make known his name to them. Yet Moses boldly asks. Now, a number of scholars believe that the proper name of God would have already been known to the Israelites, as we have pretty much seen throughout Genesis. But what is happening here is that God gives Moses the meaning or the essence of his name. So, if Moses already knew his name, why is he asking? Was Moses testing God? Or did he believe that if God gave him his true or hidden name, he might receive some of his power? Of course, this was unnecessary, as we will see, because God shares his power with Moses quite freely. But perhaps this exchange goes back to Moses' upbringing. In his Egyptian education, he would be familiar with many gods and their names. Each god was over a different domain or aspect of daily life. Was the Spirit speaking to Moses really the God of his ancestors, or some other deity? Moses said that he wanted to make sure that he was bringing the Israelites a message from their God, especially if they challenged him. But maybe Moses was testing this being because he himself doubted. Now, some may think that God's first response is the holy name, that I am is transliterated from the Tetragrammaton, but he actually says that name afterwards. His first response is Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, which can be translated as, I will be that I will be, but perhaps as, I am who I am, or I am that I am. It is almost a philosophical statement that can simply mean, I exist, I have always been, and will always be. It is really more of a statement than a name. This God is not like the Egyptian gods with their origin stories. He simply is. In fact, Aristotle will speak of God as the prime mover or the unmoved mover. Then he repeats part of this phrase when he tells Moses to relay that I am sent you. It could even be understood that his name is Ehyeh, which is very similar to the divine name, as we can see. It is in the next verse that he adds the holy name to the formula for the God of the ancestors. God tells him to say to the people of Israel, Yahweh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. So first God reveals to Moses the meaning of his name, and then he says his name and says that he is the God who is, that is the God of his people. And then he reiterates this by saying that his name is one that will be remembered for all generations. And then he says his name a third time, and this time he connects it to the covenant or the promise that he made with the ancestors. At this point in the narrative, God tells Moses his entire plan, that Moses will approach Pharaoh with the elders, he will refuse, God will do all sorts of wonders, and then the Egyptians will not only let them go, but will basically pay them to leave. This, of course, is not the end of the conversation, because as we will see, Moses is very much the reluctant servant of the Lord. So what does this revelation of Adonai mean? Not only for Moses, but also for us. At this point in his life, Moses probably figured out that this was his life. 40 years had passed, and no one from Egypt had come looking for him. He was married, had 2 sons, a steady job as a shepherd, and at 80 years old was probably looking forward to retirement. Then he decides to check out this weird fire, and wow, he realized that his journey was just getting started.
I'm getting too old for this sort of thing.
But God was always there. He was there at the beginning of creation. He was the one who led Abraham and company. He watched over Joseph and his brothers, and even now he hears the cry of the Israelites in Egypt. And while these people will live and die, and another generation will take their place, God remains. And the Lord is not aloof. He not only sees what happens, but hears their cry. He is faithful to his promises. And God had made a promise with Abraham and his descendants, a promise that was still unfulfilled. But the name of God reveals that our time and our lifespans are small compared to the Lord. Things don't always happen when we think that they should happen. Generations may pass, but the God who is and the God who will be continues to be. Nations will rise and fall, but God will intervene in the fullness of time, often in ways that are beyond comprehension. So why at that time? Why Moses? For the Jews, this was the beginning of a new era, a time when God would reveal not only the nature of his name, but his laws and rituals that would truly set this nation apart. For Christians too, this was the beginning of something incredible, but something that would not reach its fulfillment until God reveals himself again in the incarnation, in the person of the Christ. God will reveal himself as the Logos, the Word. And through all of this, God remains. As the ancient doxology, the Gloria Patri, says, Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. So if you feel that God has not heard your plight, your prayer, or shown you your vocation in life, consider Moses. God made a promise to Abraham, but it took 7 generations for the Exodus to take place, for them to even start their journey to the Promised Land. And Moses was 80 when God called him. The God who is has a plan for each of us. But are we ready when we hear the call? Do we have the courage, like Moses, to look, listen, and to say, Here I am, Lord? Thank you so much for joining me, and my question to you is this. When did you hear the call of the Lord in your life? Or are you still waiting? I'd love to get the conversation started. And next time we'll hear about the reluctance of Moses as we continue to read this story. Until then, God bless, and continue to be open to the signs and wonders in your life.